John the Killer. Everyone knows the story of Jeff the Killer, right? And mostly everyone knows about Jane, Jeff's attempt to make someone like him. And everyone knows that it didn't work out. But does anyone know the story of John? Now, Jeff had been on his rampage for the past 3 years. He is approximately 16 years old now. Jeff was still killing and doing his thing while trying to stay away from Jane, the usual. But still, even if Jeff wasn't capable of normal thought, that Jane was supposed to feel so much for that, Jeff had an idea, a new idea. He decided if a type of lover would reject him, maybe a little brother type person wouldn't. He was in the town of West Valley, a pretty small town. Jeff wouldn't be able to stay for long without getting caught. In time, he noticed a young boy about 13 who seemed perfect. The kid was a lot. Just watching those bullies made Jeff angry. It caused him to remember so he often fought, and in that moment, Jeff saw something in John's eyes. Just a small spark of pleasure from fighting. It reminded Jeff in some ways of him. It reminded Jeff of him in some ways. That feeling, Jeff could only explain, is an odd feeling in the past now, but now fully understands what it is. What? John had no idea he was about to become Jeff's latest victim. John felt an odd feeling when he fought, sure, but he never gave it much thought. It was an enjoyable feeling, so who really cared? John hadn't known anyone was watching him fight back. If he had, maybe he could have gotten away from what was going to happen to him. I can barely see this shit. Maybe he could have been able to do something to prevent it. John wasn't able to do with that feeling. The next day there was a news report. 3 boys killed today on Parks Avenue. No one witnessed an event. The event, however, based on how they were killed, police suspect that the same unknown killer who has been murdering people all across the country killed them. So they were stabbed. Yes, the same killer. His trademark method of killing, stabbing. It's an open and shut case. Let's see. A young boy who survived his killer once is the only person who ever saw him. The description is chilling, but we can assume he is now in West Valley. John had, of course, heard the rumors of this killer, but never expected him to be in his own hometown. John was more surprised when he realized the victims were the bullies that were picking on him yesterday. Was this just a weird coincidence? John was confused as to why them specifically, but once again didn't think too much about it. What John didn't know was that Jeff had simply done it as a quote-unquote favor to John. The next day seemed to be the same as any other to John. The teachers at school told the students that something this unusual could cause stress for some students, so they had to go to mandatory counseling section. John eventually had to go, even though he really didn't want to. Hello, John Williams. How are you today? The counselor asked in a sweet voice. Fine, John replied, not really wanting to be there. So, how have you been acting to this recent tragedy? How do you feel about it? She asked. It was a very throaty woman. I didn't really know them very well, Jennings said. What could Jeff possibly be doing there? She didn't want to wait around to find out, so she set off for West Valley. She wasn't very concerned about what Jeff wanted there, just concerned with finally killing him. She only wanted at least part of this nightmare of her life to end. The real nightmare was just beginning for John that night. The nightly routine was normal for John. Homework, dinner, TV, or video games, sometimes both, then bed. But Jeff snuck in the middle of the night. John heard some noise in the downstairs section of the house and went to check. That's when he saw his mom. He saw her with a wound on her stomach. She was stabbed. John couldn't believe what he saw. Jeff was there with a blood-stained knife in his hand, and that evil grin carved onto his face. "What the hell?" John yelled, and Jeff turned to look at him still with that horrible grin. John screamed and ran from the room to get his father, who had a metal baseball bat, hopefully, but when John arrived to the room, however, Jeff somehow beat him to it, and John walked in to see Jeff stab his father. "Just go to sleep, old man," Jeff said. John lets out a yell and falls to the floor dead. "No, stop!" John yelled. You didn't need them," Jeff said. "I'm the only family you'll ever need." That voice, John thought, that horrible, evil voice, it chilled him to his very bones. That voice was so full of malice and a sick type of joy. John ran with terror. "Don't worry, friend, I won't hurt ya." John ran outside and bumped into Jane suddenly. John yelled again, worried that there were two of them now. "Don't worry, you don't have to be afraid. I'm here to help," Jane said. "Trust me." She looked like Jeff, but her voice was somewhat soothing and comforting, yet darkness over her eyes made her seem soulless. We must hurry," she said. Jane grabbed John and run fast away from the house. Jeff only caught glimpses of them running off. "Damn it, Jane!" He yelled, clearly angry, even though his face still had his permanent smile. Jane had taken John back to a hotel where she was hiding during out of stay. She knew for a fact Jeff wanted to kill John. He simply would have, and that worried her more. So if he simply didn't want to kill John, what did he want? "What the heck is going on? Who are you? Who was that guy?" John yelled in a panic. "Okay, first of all, calm down," Jane said. "My name is Jane, and that guy was Jeff. It's too long a story to explain, but he likes killing people, and I've made it my life goal to finally stop him. As for what's going on, for some reason he doesn't want to kill you, and that concerns me." John was still panicked by this whole thing. John was just as confused as Jane. "He killed my parents," John mumbled, obviously scared. "He killed mine too. That's why I hate him so much. I will try to protect you from him, but I can't promise anything." They kept on talking and discussing Jeff. They finally began to make a plan to kill him. They knew it might not be long until Jeff found them again. Then suddenly Jeff charged into the room. "Hello, Jane. As much as I would love to chat, I have some unfinished business to finish. He said, looking at John with that evil face. "Stay away from me," John yelled. "What kind of lies has my former girlfriend been feeding ya?" "What the hell are you talking about? I would never date someone as vile as you," Jane said, clearly angry. Whatever, details don't matter. I need John," Jeff said, not at all interested in Jane. He went after John when Jane cut him off. There wasn't long between the two cut in a fight. Both of them were out for blood. Jeff kept on making swings with his knife at Jeff. Jane was prepared to finally end Jeff, dodging his attacks and taking a swing of her own. Jane then swept his legs under Jeff's legs and knocking him over. He rolled out just before she jumped on him. Jeff moved swiftly as he grabbed John, hurried out of the room. Okay, the fight scene's over. Jane chased close behind. Man, he was fast. It wasn't long until Jeff ran into an abandoned warehouse with John. All this is just like several feet within each other. Like the Power Rangers district of buildings just being right fuck there. Okay, we'll have to make this quick," Jeff said. "Let me go," John screamed, his eyes begging for mercy. "You killed my family." I'm the only family you'll need from now on." He poured out a bottle of some kind of beer. He smashed it over John's head until he was soaking in it. He then poured out a bottle of bleach and poured it over John's head. I actually had some alcohol this time around. Stop it! What are you doing? John yelled out a lighter and threw it at John. Jane ran in just in time to hear John's horrible screams of pain and pure terror. Jeff sighed and jumped out a nearby window. See you soon. She had to put out John's flames. She then heard a police sirens. She didn't want to leave John, but she didn't want to get arrested for setting the fire. I'll be back for you, she whispered and also jumped out the window. When John woke up, he was in a hospital bed, bandages covering most of his face. Only a small opening was there for him to see out. He tried saying, "Where am I?" but it was muffled by his covered mouth, so it just came out as, "Woo woo." Oh, good, you're awake, a nurse said. It's been 2 weeks. We were worried. 2 weeks, John thought to himself. A few days passed, and the nurse was taking care of him. They said that they would have to wait before removing the bandages. John was scared of what had happened to him, but he often felt that he was having trouble remembering what exactly happened. For all he knew was that it scared him, terrified him. When he mentioned this to the nurse, she simply said that sometimes shock can cause a blur of memories for a while, then strangely shock causes people to remember the incident clearly. What? After a few more days, the doctors said he would remove the coverings. When they did, they all let out a slight gasp. This confused John. What? He asked. He looked in the mirror and he was a little scared. His skin was now complete paper white and leathery. His once blonde hair was still short, but now it was burnt black. He realized he looked like those two other people, Jeff and Jane. Oh my God, John said, clearly upset, almost crying. The nurse put her arm around John, telling him it would be okay. And in that time, more surgery, he would look almost completely like he used to. John spent the next few days in the hospital. He was trying to cope with what happened. Part of him liked it. It felt like that odd feeling, but more intense. He was having trouble remembering the thing that happened to him. His mind and memories were screwed up by the traumatic event. He was more confused than anything. Then one night, Jeff snuck in. Hello, John. He said in that voice. Jeff? John said, barely remembering things. How you doing, little brother? Brother? John asked in his dazed state. Carmen, I'm going to get you out of this place. He grabbed John and pulled him out from the window. John didn't seem to care as he was still confused, and even more so after Jeff called him brother. John handed John a pair of gray pants, a white t-shirt, and a black hoodie to wear instead of his nightgown he had been wearing. John quickly changed and grinned at Jeff. Jeff handed John a kitchen knife. John insisted he could spike his hair like John insisted that he could spike his hair like he always used to. Jeff broke into a nearby store and stole some hair gel for John to use. Hair gel for John to use. Maybe killing the clerk on his way, but neither Jeff nor John mightn't. Jeff and John left the town of West Valley a few days after that. They went for the next town. They went to a town and found a group of drunken teen girls wandering around. Jeff decided to help them. Jeff and John both attacked the girls, with Jeff telling them to go to sleep and John not really saying anything. Jeff tried to get John to carve a smile onto his face, but John refused to. He wore a crazy smile most of the time anyway, so he didn't feel it necessary. It felt good to help Jeff, but part of him was upset and guilty at the idea of what he was doing. Neither of them had realized that Jane had followed them. She had seen John with Jeff, although he had sure Jeff dodged and made the attack on his own. John was watching the two of them, confused for so many reasons. One, what made them fight so instantly? 2, who should he help? And 3, where do you remember Jane from? John wanted to help Jeff, but he also knew somewhere deep down Jane had good reasons, so he decided it was best not to get involved at all. Finally, Jane finally got past Jeff and hurried up to grab John. John was yelling all the way for him to let go. I should help you, Jane yelled at the kid. I don't need help, but let go. John yelled as he started kicking. John, whatever the fuck our names are. John, Jeff ain't your friend, don't you remember? Jane asked. John quieted it down, but just looked at her. He wasn't sure what to think now. Some part of John wanted to trust her, but the other part wanted to trust Jeff. Jane kept John with her for a few more days. He constantly struggled and tried to escape, but she always stopped him. One day, John even killed a random teen walking past during his day with Jane. Nothing too gory worth talking about, it simply happened. Jane yelled at him, trying to convince him that he wasn't like Jeff and didn't have to be. I'm sorry, I don't want to kill, but I can't help it, John says, suddenly crying, his face lost in that crazy smile, and his eyes showed sadness and even fear. Fear of himself, of Jeff, and of whatever part of him let him act like Jeff. Jeff wasn't... He left crying as Jane tried her best to comfort him. She could admit that even she had an outburst during which she killed people, imagining that person was Jeff's and using it as practice for when she found him, so she could relate to John. Jeff eventually found John and Jane. He wanted to avoid Jane altogether, so he whispered and lured John away. Jane went to talk to John and found he was already gone. She knew Jeff had taken him, but also knew there wasn't much she can do. 1 year later. John was still slightly confused. His face showed nothing but pure insanity more often than not. He sometimes snapped back to reality and cried about stuff when he was done. Jeff tells him that he is weak, but it proves that part of John isn't completely lost. Jane barely lost at all and hated Jeff. Jane was barely lost at all and hated Jeff. I tried to read that in a way that made that sentence make sense. Jeff was completely lost beyond any hope, and John was somewhere between the two. John spends most of his time with Jeff, but sometimes will wander off on his own and go on as long as months without Jeff. He never found Jane again, although he often tries to. However, John remains hesitant about exactly what he should do, and has been known to even warn his victims before killing them. John is still out there, and it's possible you might run to him. If he's in a normal mood, there's nothing to worry about. He might talk to you about his life, might hang out with you, and act pretty much like a normal kid. But if you find him in an insane mood, or when he is with Jeff, watch out! He will most likely be killed, and the last thing you will hear from John would be a simple question. Should you go to sleep? Credit to Red Dan. One of the most polite serial killers I've ever seen.